She walked in for lunch, but walked out having exposed a room full of prejudice, power, and pretense. And none of them knew they had just insulted the future heir of the empire they worshipped. It was a Friday afternoon in mid-spring, the sun hanging like golden silk across the downtown skyline of Atlanta. Students rushed through sidewalks as final bells echoed from nearby schools, and traffic thickened with the usual chaos of early weekend life. Among the crowd, 17-year-old Aaliyah Washington walked with an easy rhythm, one earbud in, listening to soft jazz that reminded her of her dad's playlists. Her curly puff bobbed with each step, her lavender hoodie hugged close to her shoulders, and the A necklace glinted each time it caught the sunlight. She had no intention of making a scene. No goal but to grab a quiet bite at Bistro Lumiere. Before heading to her father's office in the back to surprise him for his birthday, Bistro Lumiere wasn't just any restaurant. It was one of Atlanta's most celebrated fine dining establishments, a fusion of French and Southern soul, known for its mahogany decor, floor-length drapes, dazzling crystal chandeliers. It's a kind of place where waiters floated like ballet dancers, where the wine list had its own book, and where every corner whispered class. It was also the brainchild of Charles Washington, Aaliyah's father. The same man who'd worked his way up from dishwasher to founder over 2 decades. Without shortcuts, and with zero tolerance for disrespect, as she approached the entrance, Aaliyah looked down at herself and chuckled. She wasn't dressed for the place, not by traditional standards. No heels, no dress, just ripped jeans and sneakers. She tugged her hoodie down slightly, checked her reflection in the tinted glass, and thought, nah, they'll know who I am. But inside, things unfolded differently. A man named Dylan, the newly hired motor D, spotted her first. Tall, lean, and dressed in a black waistcoat that seemed tailored to match his ego. He quickly intercepted her as she stepped through the door. Subtle hush of silverware against porcelain, low murmur of wealthy conversation. It all seemed to pause. "Excuse me?" he said with a sharp edge. "This establishment has a dress code." Aaliyah blinked. "Hi, I'm just here for we don't seat people in athletic wear," Dylan cut in, offering a polished but fake smile. His eyes barely masked his assumption.
Yes. There's a
fast food place 2 blocks down. She stared at him, momentarily speechless. Behind her, the door clicked shut. The silence in the room wrapped tighter, like the air had thickened. "I know where I am," she said softly. "Then you should also know," Dylan replied, voice lower now. "This isn't the kind of place people just walk into off the street. Reservations only. Try again next time." Aaliyah paused, her jaw tightened slightly. Not because he'd insulted her clothes, not even because of the way he said people, but because he had no idea who he was talking to, and she wasn't about to tell him. Not yet. She nodded slowly. Got it. She stepped back, taking one last glance at the tables around her. Well-dressed couples, group of businessmen, a family with a birthday cake being lit in the corner. No one intervened. Then she turned and walked out. Outside, she pulled her phone from her pocket and hit Dad. The phone rang once. "Hey, sweetheart," Charles answered cheerfully. "You at the office already?" "No," she said, her voice calm. "But I'm right outside. I just tried to eat at Lumiere, and your new motor D refused me a table." There was a long pause. "What?" said, voice now sharp with concern. "Why?" Said I didn't belong here, dress code. "No reservation," she sighed. "Don't worry. I'll just meet you later." "No, stay right there." Click. Less than 2 minutes later, the glass doors of Bistro Lumiere flung open, and Charles Washington stormed through with the confidence of a man who owned every inch of the ground. He walked on because he did. His suit was crisp, his expression thunderous, and the whole restaurant seemed to freeze as the reality of who he was hit. Dylan stepped forward, uncertain. "Sir, was it you?" Charles barked. "You turned away a young black girl in a hoodie, told her she didn't belong here," Dylan stammered. "I didn't know she was. She's my daughter," Charles roared. "And she belongs here more than anyone else in this room. This place was built with her name on the blueprints. And you humiliated her in front of my customers?" By now, every eye in the room was locked on them, Phones discreetly lifted. Patrons leaned in, lips parted. I thought Dylan started. That's the problem, Charles snapped. You thought, you assumed, you judged her by her clothes, her skin, and not for 1 second did you consider who she was. You disrespected not only a guest, you disrespected my family. I'm sorry, Dylan said, the color draining from his face. Charles's voice dropped to a quieter, sharper tone. You can be sorry on your way out. You're firing me? You're lucky I'm not suing you. At that moment, the front doors opened again, and Aaliyah stepped back in, having watched the confrontation from outside. She walked past Dylan without a glance, straight to the center of the restaurant. Stopped. I'm not here to cause drama, she said calmly, her voice carrying just enough. I came here to eat, celebrate my dad's birthday, and enjoy food that was made from his heart. But what I walked into wasn't a restaurant. It was a mirror showing me that even in places we build, people will try to erase us. The room remained silent. Aaliyah looked at Dylan now. Next time a black girl walks in with curls and sneakers, you might want to serve her, because she might own everything you're standing on. And with that, she sat down at the best table in the restaurant, crossing one leg over the other, and smiled as her father joined her. Outside, the story had already begun to spread. A customer had posted a clip to social media. Within hours, it would go viral. But for now, inside Bistro Lumiere, something more powerful was happening. A room full of people learning what it meant to treat someone with dignity, not because of who they knew, but because they were human, and Aaliyah. She didn't just reclaim her seat at the table, she reminded them who built it. The soft clinking of cutlery resumed cautiously around Bistro Lumiere as Aaliyah sat gracefully at the pristine white tablecloth, her fingers gently tracing the rim of the water glass. The tension had not entirely left the room. Even the chandeliers seemed to hang more still than usual, as if they too had witnessed something sacred. Aaliyah's calm was the kind that wasn't taught, it was inherited. It came from her father. It came from knowing that she had nothing to prove, and still, she proved everything. Charles Washington sat across from her, loosening his tie ever so slightly and letting out a breath that carried both relief and restrained fury. He signaled to the kitchen without saying a word. The staff behind the swinging doors already knew tonight's service had changed. Tonight they were serving not just food, but justice. Across the room, people whispered. A couple near the window murmured to one another in disbelief. A man with salt-gray hair and a Rolex on his wrist kept checking his phone. Watching the video he'd just seen online loop again, Dylan being dismissed. Aaliyah stepping forward, her poise, her power. The comment section had exploded within minutes. This is why you treat everyone with respect. She's a queen and didn't have to say a word to prove it. The quiet clapback. Iconic. The waiter just fumbled the bag of a lifetime. Outside, a small crowd had begun to gather. Not a protest, not a mob, just people. Standing and looking in through the tall front windows, murmuring things like "that's her" and "that's the girl" inside. Charles leaned forward slightly. "You okay?" he asked her gently. Aaliyah nodded. "Honestly, I didn't expect all that. I just wanted to surprise you." Charles chuckled, but his eyes stayed serious. "You did. You reminded me why I built this place to begin with." She looked around. "Do you ever worry about this stuff happening here? I mean, do they treat people different when you're not around?" Her father paused for a moment, then answered, "Truthfully, I do. But I also know that every time it does happen, it gives us a chance to fix it." The food arrived quickly, not just because she was the owner's daughter, but because the kitchen staff, all of whom had been with Charles for years, understood the moment. They brought out her favorite truffle mac and cheese with seared scallops, paired with a sparkling peach lemonade because she wasn't old enough for wine, but deserved something special. As she took her first bite, a young server, barely 19, clearly nervous, approached their table and cleared his throat. "Miss Washington?" Aaliyah looked up. He offered a folded napkin. "On behalf of the staff, I just wanted to say thank you for how you handled that. We're all proud to work here, and you made us prouder today." She gave him a warm smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." From the far end of the restaurant, a woman in a floral dress stood up and began clapping softly. Her partner joined, then a teenager seated with his parents, and then the whole room rising into spontaneous applause, not just for Aaliyah, but for what the moment had come to represent: respect, dignity, change. But the story didn't end with dinner. Later that evening, Charles and Aaliyah returned to the office behind the kitchen. Past walls lined with framed reviews, awards, and a massive portrait of the restaurant on opening night. Charles opened his laptop, logging into the restaurant's social media accounts. And what he saw stunned even him. The video had hit 1.2 million views in under 5 hours. Comments flooded in from across the country. Civil rights leaders were sharing it. Local news stations requested interviews. A segment was already being planned for Good Morning Atlanta. He looked at Aaliyah. "You know what this means, right?" She raised an eyebrow. "You're famous," Aaliyah groaned. "Dad, I mean it. This isn't just a viral video. A moment, it's a story, and you're at the center of it." She leaned back in the chair, letting it sink in. "I didn't do it for that, I know. That's why it matters." The next morning, things moved fast. Charles received calls from the mayor's office, the local chapter of the NAACP, even a well-known restaurateur in New York, who wanted to collaborate on a social awareness dining campaign. Aaliyah, meanwhile, was swarmed at school. Friends cheered when she walked into class. One of her teachers even asked if she'd consider speaking at the end-of-year assembly, but not everyone was clapping. Some people, mostly online, called it an overreaction or just a misunderstanding. A few claimed it was a setup. One even commented, if she didn't want to be treated like that, maybe she should have dressed better. Aaliyah read the post aloud to her dad over breakfast. He just raised an eyebrow. "Let them talk," he said, "because their words won't erase what the world saw. You stayed calm, respectful, and still made your point. You didn't stoop, that's power." Well, that week, Charles made sweeping changes at Bistro Lumiere. He launched a mandatory diversity and inclusion training program for all employees. He partnered with a local youth leadership nonprofit to host monthly respect roundtables, dinner discussions on equality, empathy, and customer care. And Dylan? He tried to sue, claiming unjust dismissal, but with the video evidence, the viral attention, and the national support behind Aaliyah, the case never made it past the first hearing. Instead, Aaliyah received a letter in the mail, handwritten. From Dylan's own mother, "I raised him better than this. I am so sorry for what he did. He showed more grace in 5 minutes than he's shown in years." She read it 3 times, but the real climax came 2 weeks later. Bistro Lumiere was hosting its first Respect Roundtable. Attendees included journalists, city officials, youth activists, and high school students from across the city. The centerpiece of the event was a large table, circular, inclusive, with a placard in the center that read, "Everyone has a seat." Aaliyah was the keynote speaker. She didn't have notes. She didn't rehearse. She stood at the front of the room, hands folded, her curls shining under the soft lights, and said, "I didn't come here to make a point, but a point was made. Not just about me, but about what happens when you assume someone's worth based on how they look. I was told I didn't belong in a place that literally has my family's name written into its walls. Imagine how often that happens to people who don't own the building." She let the silence sit. "Respect," she continued, "isn't something you give based on outfits. Something you give because it's right." The applause this time wasn't just warm, it was thunderous. Charles watched his daughter and smiled, proud beyond words. This wasn't just a lesson in standing your ground. It was the beginning of a movement. One led not with anger, but with grace. And it had started with a girl in sneakers, a hoodie, and a whole lot of heart by the time Monday morning rolled. Around Aaliyah, Washington was no longer just a local name. She was everywhere. Her face, framed by her iconic curly puff, adorned online magazines, viral reels, and even a Time article titled, "The Teen Who Redefined Hospitality with Grace." To Aaliyah, it was surreal. To her classmates, she had become a legend. To the world, a new kind of role model. She wasn't loud. She didn't scream, but she stood, and in a time of noise, her quiet fire echoed louder than any roar. Yet fame, no matter how deserved, doesn't come without shadows. It started subtly. A snide remark in the hallway at school. "Oh, look, it's the restaurant princess." Then came the fake smiles from students who'd never spoken to her before. People who used to ignore her were now asking to collab on content, and worse. Some anonymous trolls online launched a smear campaign, pulling old photos from her middle school days, mocking her hair, her fashion choices, even spreading rumors that her story was staged. One viral post read, "If the owner's daughter can walk in any time, then why did she act surprised about the treatment?" Sounds like clout chasing. Aaliyah tried to ignore it. She focused on school, family, and her art, a private love she hadn't shared with many outside her inner circle. Sketching was her peace. And now, more than ever, she needed that peace. Her sanctuary was a small studio space above Bistro Lumiere, just past the storage loft. Years ago, her dad had given her the keys to it on her 13th birthday, calling it her skybox. It had skylights, blank canvases, and a soft gray couch she often curled up on when life felt heavy. And on that Tuesday evening, as the internet buzzed, Aaliyah climbed the stairs to that space with a worn sketchbook and a pencil in her hand. She didn't sketch herself. She drew the table, the one Dylan refused her. But this time in her sketch, she surrounded it with faces of people from all walks of life, a girl in a hijab, a boy in a wheelchair, an elderly man with weathered eyes, a young black child with wide, curious eyes. And in the center, the table had no menus or silverware, only a sign that read, "You belong." It was quiet up there. Just the sound of pencil strokes and her heartbeat, until footsteps echoed on the stairs. Her father appeared in the doorway, holding a plate of warm beignets and a small cup of her favorite vanilla chai. "Figured you might need these," he said softly. She smiled. He sat beside her. "Tough day." She didn't have to answer. "I saw the posts," he added, "and I know they'd sting. But baby, the lies don't outweigh your truth." Aaliyah leaned into him. "Why do people hate so fast?" "I didn't even say anything wrong. I was polite. I didn't yell. I just existed, and they hate that." Charles kissed the top of her curls. "Because your existence challenges their comfort. You didn't yell. You stood. That's what scares them. Because now they have to look at themselves and ask why. They felt justified in treating someone differently just for walking in with natural hair and sneakers." Aaliyah looked down. "I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to be me." He nodded. "That's exactly what makes you powerful." The next day brought a twist. Bistro Lumiere received a formal invitation from the Atlanta Youth Equity Council. They wanted Aaliyah to attend their annual summit as the keynote speaker. Not just a guest. Not a panelist. The voice, the theme of the summit, claiming your space. Youth power in institutional change. Aaliyah hesitated. "I don't know, Dad," she said at breakfast. "That's big. Like, adult big." "You are big," he replied, sipping his coffee. "And they see it. They're not inviting you because you went viral. They're inviting you because you handled yourself with dignity when most adults would have exploded, because you turned a moment into a movement. And because other kids, especially black girls, need to see what that looks like." So she said yes. Preparation wasn't easy. Aaliyah worked every night after school, crafting her message. She refused to let anyone write it for her. "It has to be mine," she insisted. She watched speeches by Amanda Gorman, Greta Thunberg, even Michelle Obama. But in the end, she didn't try to copy them. She just let her truth flow. And when the day arrived, she stepped onto the stage of the Atlanta Civic Auditorium in front of more than 800 students. Educators and activists from across the country. She wore a fitted black blazer over a soft lavender turtleneck, a subtle callback to the hoodie she wore the day it all started. Her curls were half up, half down, her skin glowing under the soft spotlights. She approached the podium. Just a small index card with a few words. Shadows, names, tables, power. She spoke for 11 minutes. No stumbles. No nerves. She spoke about being unseen, about being mislabeled, about what it feels like to be told, even silently, that you don't belong. She spoke about how identity shouldn't have to be defended, and how grace is not weakness, it's control. When people say, "I didn't know who you were," what they really mean is, "I didn't think you were worth knowing." And we can't change the world by yelling at it. Sometimes we have to show it something better. Standing ovation lasted nearly 3 minutes. After the speech, students swarmed her. Some with tears. Some with stories. "I'm not even black," said one girl. "But what you said made me realize how often I shrink myself at school just to fit in." "My brother's autistic," said a boy in a denim jacket. "People exclude him all the time." "What you said made me want to protect his space more." By the time Aaliyah returned home, her inbox was full. So were her heart and her vision. She didn't just want to speak. She wanted to create something real, an initiative. The fallout from the viral video had begun to ripple like a dropped stone in still water. Days after Aaliyah's calm confrontation and Charles Washington's thunderous entrance into Bistro Lumiere, news stations, bloggers, and civil rights groups were clamoring to weigh in. But inside the Washington home, the atmosphere was calm. Almost deceptively so. Charles sat at the breakfast table reading the paper. Though he was more interested in Aaliyah's expressions than any article, she sat across from him, her curly, puff now slightly damp from the morning shower, sipping mango juice and scrolling through her phone. "More interviews?" he asked. "For requests this morning?" "2 from podcasts, 1 from a local news anchor. 1 from this teen activism channel called Speak It Loud," she said without looking up. He leaned back and smiled. "You becoming a celebrity?" Aaliyah shrugged. "Not what I wanted, but maybe. It's what I'm supposed to do." Her father didn't answer immediately. Silence wasn't empty, it was thoughtful. He remembered being 17, watching his mother get denied tables, jobs, and basic dignity. And now his daughter had the chance to speak against those same injustices, not from a place of rage, but of reason. "If you choose this," he said slowly, "you're stepping into something bigger than all of us. I know, and the restaurant may never go back to how it was." "I'm not sure I want it to," Aaliyah replied. "That place needs to evolve." Charles was quiet again. Bistro Lumiere had been his dream, built from scratch after years of sweat in other people's kitchens, but maybe dreams needed to stretch. Maybe this wasn't destruction, it was rebirth. Meanwhile, across the city, the ex-head waiter Dylan was fuming. The backlash had cost him not only his job, but his reputation. He had hoped to quietly move on, maybe relocate to another upscale restaurant. But the internet was not so forgetful. His name was everywhere attached to hashtags, think pieces, and reaction videos. Even got doxxed, and his ego couldn't take it. One evening, as Dylan sat at a bar downtown nursing a drink, his friend Caleb slid into the booth beside him. "You're a damn meme now," Caleb said, not even trying to be comforting. Dylan sneered. "They're acting like I hit her or something." "Buys. I didn't even yell. She told the daughter of the owner she didn't belong. That's the worst kind of stupid. Didn't know she was the daughter?" Caleb raised an eyebrow. "But you knew she was black, and you judged her for that." That silenced Dylan for a beat. Whatever, Dylan muttered. "It's not like she looked like someone who belonged there." "Maybe you're right, but that mindset." "Why your name's on fire now?" Back at Bistro Lumiere, things were changing fast. Charles had called an all-staff meeting mandatory. "No exceptions. I want transparency," he told the employees standing before him. No more whispers about race, appearance, or background. Every single person who walks through that door deserves respect, period. A few servers exchanged nervous glances. Some were loyal, others hesitant. The sous chef, an older white man named Greg, raised his hand. "So what happens if a customer's out of line? You want us to just smile and take it?" Charles looked him straight in the eye. "No, but I want us to handle it better than they do." Pointed to a screen on the wall and hit play. It was security footage from the day Aaliyah had been refused a table. The staff watched the silent clip in discomfort. Dylan's smugness, Aaliyah's calm refusal to be rattled, the way she had left with grace. Then Charles played a second clip, This time it showed a black couple being seated near the back, even though they'd arrived before a white family who got the prime window view. That happened last month, Charles said. I didn't know about it until now. People shifted awkwardly. The truth was heavy. We're better than this, he continued. Or we become better than this, starting now. He appointed Aliyah to a new position, Youth Outreach Director. Her job was unconventional. Host community discussions, lead teen mentorship dinners, and occasionally advise on marketing. A 17-year-old in a leadership role? Some scoffed. But Charles knew his daughter's presence would shake the walls, exactly what they needed. Aliyah wasn't there to sit quietly. Her first event was called You Belong Here, a free dinner for teens of color across the city, especially those who'd experienced discrimination. Local artists played live music, and Aliyah gave a short, heartfelt speech about being seen, heard, and respected. Her voice trembled at first, but when she looked around and saw a sea of young faces, nodding some misty-eyed, her fear dissolved. She was where she needed to be. One of the attendees, a 16-year-old named Marcus, waited after the dinner to speak to her. I used to bus tables downtown, he said. Manager would make me eat in the back, said I'd scare guests. I quit after a month. I'm so sorry, Aliyah replied. It's okay now, seeing you speak tonight. It reminded me that we don't have to shrink ourselves. She smiled. Promise me you won't. I won't. From that night, Aliyah's role blossomed. She began planning regular events, storytelling nights, cultural tastings, even scholarships through the restaurant's growing nonprofit arm. But not everyone was thrilled. In boardrooms, whispers started. Investors, mostly older men who had backed Bistro Lumiere in its early days, questioned whether Charles was diluting the brand. This isn't a community center, one said sharply on a Zoom call. It's a high-end dining experience. People are lining up to experience it more than ever, Charles countered. Because now it means something. Pause. This isn't about optics. It's about integrity. But behind the scenes, some of the original investors began looking for ways to pressure Charles into stepping down, or at least quieting down his daughter's influence. When Aliyah caught wind of it, she went straight to her father. Let me handle this, she said. He looked at her, surprised. You're 17. Exactly. I'm the one they're afraid of, so I'm going to give them a reason. The next week, Aliyah launched a video campaign called Table for Everyone, featuring testimonials from real people who had faced discrimination in restaurants, followed by shots of them being welcomed into Bistro Lumiere. It was tasteful, emotional, and it hit home. The campaign exploded online. Celebrities reposted it. Teachers showed it in classrooms. One investor even called to say I was wrong. Still others weren't so moved. One anonymous donor pulled out. But 10 new ones stepped in, and Aliyah stood taller. On the restaurant's next anniversary gala, she took the stage in a sleek navy blue jumpsuit, hair in a majestic braided crown. She scanned the room filled with chefs, politicians, influencers, and paused. I was once told I didn't belong here, she said. But now, we've made a place where everyone does. That's not just a change in seating, that's a change. In thinking, applause roared. Somewhere near the back, Dylan watched from the shadows. His new job as a server at a chain steakhouse had brought him face-to-face with humility. And as he watched the girl he once belittled, now command an entire room with dignity, something inside him cracked. Regret, shame, and maybe, just maybe, change. But for Aliyah, there was no time to look back. The future was calling, and she was ready to answer. The quiet after the storm at Bistro Lumiere felt almost unnatural. The buzz that had once hummed beneath the chandeliers, the clinking glasses. The polite laughter, the confident click of heels on marble had dulled, replaced by something heavier, respect. It wasn't just for Aliyah, though. She had earned it. It was for the truth that had unfolded in front of their eyes, the truth of what power looks like when wrapped in humility, intelligence, in grace. But with the incident behind her, Aliyah didn't relax. In fact, she doubled down. Aliyah had always been more than just the owner's daughter. But now, that truth burned like a mission in her chest. She started spending more time at Bistro Lumiere after school, not sitting in the reserved corner table or being served sparkling juice with a straw. No, she came with a clipboard, hair tied in a low bun, glasses perched on her nose, and sleeves rolled up. She started shadowing every department, asking questions that made employees pause and think. Why is there no Braille version of the menu? Why are all the wine descriptions written in French, but the allergy warnings are in smaller print? Who's in charge of hiring the kitchen interns? And how many of them come from underprivileged culinary schools? She wasn't just pointing out flaws. She was identifying opportunity. Charles watched with silent pride as his daughter blossomed into something even he hadn't expected, a force. While he had built Bistro Lumiere from scratch, brick by brick, recipe by recipe, she was now reshaping its soul. It was one evening after closing when Chef Marisol found Aaliyah sitting on a bar stool, sketching something in a notebook. "Still at it?" the chef asked with a smirk, brushing flour from her apron. Aaliyah looked up, smiling. "Just figuring out how we can create a community tasting night. Okay, open kitchen, storytelling by chefs, and get this, invite high school students to help cook." Chef Marisol raised an eyebrow. "You trying to make me work overtime, girl? You already do." Aaliyah grinned, and they both laughed. But not everyone was laughing, not in the quiet corners. Eric, one of the restaurant's floor supervisors, had been at Bistro Lumiere for 8 years. He was professional, sharp, and deeply loyal to Charles. But watching Aaliyah, a teenager, come in and command attention didn't sit right with him. "She's smart," he admitted to a coworker in a low tone, "but she's still a kid. There's a reason we don't just hand restaurants over to teenagers." What Eric didn't know was that Charles had heard every word. And instead of confronting Eric, Charles simply called a meeting. "Aaliyah will be launching a junior leadership program at the restaurant," he announced in front of the entire staff, "and I expect full support." There were nods and claps, but also raised eyebrows, especially from those who weren't ready to see change wrapped in teenage skin and brown curls. Still, Aaliyah pressed forward. The junior leadership program launched with 5 interns, 3 from local high schools, 2 from culinary trade schools. All of them were given access to behind-the-scenes operations, mentorship with the chefs, and opportunities to create their own dishes. The press picked up the story quickly. From mistreatment to mission, teen sparks inclusive revolution at city's elite restaurant. Bistro Lumiere now serving opportunity with every meal. Charles Washington's daughter isn't just a victim, she's a visionary, but with attention came scrutiny. Bloggers dug into the viral video. Some cynics began spinning new narratives. One podcast host sneered, "Sounds like another case of rich daddy's girl using her last name to become a hero." It stung. Aaliyah pretended it didn't, but in private, she questioned herself. One night, she sat alone in the wine cellar, the one space in the restaurant where no one ever disturbed her. It was cold, quiet, and wrapped in history. Her fingers brushed over bottles older than her father, her breath fogging in the chilled air. Her phone buzzed. A message from her friend Zara lit up the screen. "You're doing something real. Don't let trolls make you forget that." She smiled softly, took a deep breath, and stood up straighter. She hadn't asked for any of this, not the discrimination, not the spotlight. But now that she had both, she knew what she had to do, A month later, Bistro Lumiere held its first ever youth-created tasting night. The line outside wrapped around the block inside. The restaurant was transformed. Walls displayed framed art from local high school students. Each course was designed by an intern. Aaliyah personally introduced every dish, speaking about the young chef's story, their neighborhood, and their dream. And there, in the back corner, sat Eric, arms crossed at first, skeptical. But as he tasted a seared salmon dish by a shy 17-year-old named Deshawn from Southside Culinary Prep, his expression softened by dessert. He was clapping the loudest after the event. Charles placed a hand on Aaliyah's shoulder. "You turned a moment of disrespect into a movement of direction," he said. This is what legacy looks like." But Aaliyah wasn't done. She had plans. Big ones. Ideas that stretched beyond her father's restaurant, food justice programs, scholarships for young black chefs, culinary coding camps for girls. The fire inside her didn't just burn, it fueled, and while Bistro Lumiere would always be home, she now saw the entire city, no, the entire industry, as her kitchen. Her recipe: 1 part vision, 2 parts courage, a generous pinch of resistance, a dash of memory of the day a waiter told her she didn't belong, and how she flipped the table without raising her voice. The tension at Bistro Lumiere had simmered into an electric current of transformation. It no longer echoed with the sterile politeness it once held, but pulsed with a sense of real humanity. The incident with Alia had been a catalyst, cultural earthquake that shook every employee into reflection and every customer into awareness. But while the surface sparkled with progress underneath, a more complex layer of consequence was still unraveling. Back at school, Alia noticed a shift among her peers. She wasn't just the quiet honor student or the daughter of Charles Washington anymore. She had become something bigger, a symbol of self-respect and unshaken grace. Her name was on local news, her photos circulating across social media, interviews being requested by journalists. Yet Alia remained grounded, attending her classes, leading debate team meetings, and continuing her sketching sessions at the same neighborhood cafe she had loved since childhood. But one Thursday afternoon, Alia sat across from her best friend Zara and stared silently at her untouched smoothie. "You okay?" Zara asked, gently nudging her arm. Alia shook her head slightly. "I don't know. Feel like I started something. I don't know how to finish. Everyone thinks I'm strong, but part of me, I'm just tired of being the girl that got refused a table. I didn't ask to be a symbol." Zara placed her phone face down and leaned in. "You didn't choose it. But what you did, the way you stayed calm, the way you carried yourself, that gave a lot of girls like us hope. Yeah, people are talking not just about race, but about respect." Leah blinked, tears threatening to rise. "It's just, I miss being invisible sometimes." Before all this, Zara reached over and squeezed her hand. "Maybe you don't have to be invisible to be at peace. Maybe peace is learning how to be seen without losing yourself." That thought lingered in Alia's heart as she walked home that evening, but it wasn't long before her growing role in the community took on another layer. The mayor's office contacted Charles with an idea. Alia should be honored at the City Youth Leadership Summit. Her name had risen as a nominee for the Civic Integrity and Impact Award, and the city wanted her to deliver a speech. Charles was thrilled. Alia was not. That night, over dinner, he broke the news. "They're calling you the voice of grace," he chuckled. "City Hall thinks you're the real deal. You're being honored in front of business leaders, educators, community organizers." "I don't want to give a speech," she interrupted, setting down her fork. Charles paused, surprised. "Why not?" "Because I didn't ask for this," Alia said. "I didn't do anything special. I just existed. And someone treated me like I didn't matter. But how you responded mattered," he said quietly. "You didn't just exist. You resisted. With dignity. You showed people what strength looks like when it doesn't shout." Leah looked at her father and saw not just the restaurateur, but the man who had taught her resilience. Maybe this was bigger than her discomfort. Maybe the moment had chosen her, even if she hadn't chosen the moment. By the following week, Alia was preparing her speech, line by line, sentence by sentence. Zara helped her rehearse, recording her on an old camcorder they used for debate prep. Each time Alia spoke the words, her voice grew steadier. Each time she paused, she imagined the faces of young girls, watching girls who looked like her, talked like her, felt unseen like she once did. The night of the summit arrived. Alia wore a sleek navy jumpsuit, tailored to perfection. Her natural curls parted to the side and pinned back with gold clips. As she stepped onto the stage in front of hundreds, applause thundered before she even opened her mouth. When she spoke, the room fell silent. "I am not here because I did something extraordinary. I am here because something ordinary happened to me and I decided not to let it define me." The crowd leaned in. "I walked into a restaurant that my father built with his bare hands, and I was told I didn't belong. Not because of my actions, but because of my skin, my age, my appearance. But I chose not to shout. I chose not to argue. I chose to stand in my truth. As she finished, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. The mayor wiped away a tear. Zara screamed from the front row. Charles stood, hand over his heart, glowing with pride. That night, Aaliyah didn't just speak, she soared. But not everyone was pleased with Aaliyah's rise. Miles away, Dylan, former waiter, current jobless cynic, sat in a bar watching her speech play on the news. His face twisted in bitterness. The girl he thought he'd embarrassed had become a city icon. He hadn't just lost a job, he'd become a warning. Unbelievable, he muttered, downing his drink. All this because I told some teenager to wait outside. His friend, a bartender named Rick, looked at him cautiously. You messed up, man. Big time. Should have just done your job. Dylan sneered. You don't get it.
That place used to be something.
Now it's all about wokeness and appearances. But as Rick walked away, Dylan knew deep down that the fault lay within himself. The world had moved forward. He hadn't. Back at Bistro Lumiere, a new culture was thriving. The once exclusive space now welcomed students, teachers, and neighborhood families. The restaurant had become a living reflection of Charles's original dream, a place where everyone could belong, no matter who they were or how they looked. Aaliyah visited regularly now, because she had to prove a point, but because she wanted to. She'd sketch by the windows, often unnoticed, watching how people interacted differently now. How waiters smiled more genuinely, how customers seemed more at ease. The restaurant had become more than a place to eat. It was a symbol. One rainy afternoon, as she sipped tea by the corner window, a little black girl walked in with her mother. The girl looked nervous, clutching a paper menu in both hands. Leah smiled, walked over, and knelt beside her. First time here? She asked gently. The girl nodded. Double quotes. Well, you picked the best seat in the house, Aaliyah whispered. And the food? Even better. The little girl's smile lit up the room. In that moment, Aaliyah realized she didn't have to be invisible to feel safe. She could be visible and powerful, grounded and graceful all at once, and she was just getting started. 10 seconds. That's how long it took for the entire city to recognize Aaliyah Washington as more than just a restaurant owner's daughter. The video of her being turned away had gone viral, but what came afterward, her poise, her quiet strength, and her refusal to retaliate with bitterness, sparked something much larger. Now, the air buzzed with attention, opportunity, and a pressure unlike anything Aaliyah had ever faced before. As morning sun poured through her bedroom windows, Aaliyah sat at her desk, surrounded by newspaper clippings, interview requests, and a neatly folded letter from her dream university, Columbia. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the gold-embossed letterhead. The offer was generous, a full-ride scholarship, a place in their prestigious business leadership program, a glowing note about her character and courage. She hadn't said yes yet. Downstairs, Bistro Lumiere had transformed. No longer just a luxury restaurant, it had evolved into a landmark for fairness, inclusion, and community pride. Charles, her father, had handed over part of the operations to Aaliyah, encouraging her to experiment with youth events, mentorship nights, and a rotating showcase of young chefs and entrepreneurs of color. The same space where she'd once been. Denaida Table was now hosting panels on equity and hospitality, panels she herself had helped create. But fame came with conflict. Some critics claimed it was all dramatized, that Aaliyah had used her father's wealth to create a narrative. Others sent her hate messages online, accusing her of playing the race card or calling her privileged. The words didn't hurt her as much as they used to. But what she couldn't shake was the question that now loomed over her every decision. What now? The spark for clarity came in the most unlikely place, the kitchen. Aaliyah was experimenting with a new pasta recipe alongside Matteo, a teen from a community program she'd started. He was quiet, observant, and had an incredible palate. As they cooked together, she noticed him watching her closely, his eyes filled with admiration. You're not like most adults, he said. Aaliyah laughed. I'm not even an adult yet, but you act like one. You listen. You don't act like you're better than me just because you own stuff. The comment stayed with her. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked through the restaurant's now iconic main floor, barefoot in a hoodie, remembering the girl she was the day Dylan had denied her. She remembered how she'd felt, dismissed, invisible, underestimated. She didn't want to be famous for that moment. She wanted to be known for what she built from it. That's when the idea hit. Weeks later, Bistro Lumiere hosted a press conference. The dining hall was packed, the media buzzing. Aaliyah took the stage beside her father, not in a designer dress, but in jeans and her lavender-cropped hoodie, the same one she wore that fateful day. "I'm proud of the way this community has supported me," she said calmly. "But I want to make something clear. That moment when I was denied a table, that wasn't the end of something. That was the beginning." She paused. "I'm launching the Lumiere Project, a national mentorship and entrepreneurship initiative for Black and underrepresented youth who want to enter hospitality, business, and leadership. It's time to change the way we see potential, not based on clothes or assumptions or skin color, but on passion and purpose." The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. But in the middle of it all, Aaliyah looked out and found the eyes of a young Black girl seated beside her mother in the crowd. She wore her hair in a big curly puff and had that same look of nervous hope Aaliyah remembered seeing in her own reflection once. That look made every second worth it. Months later, Aaliyah found herself on stage again, this time at Columbia. University's orientation? She'd accepted the offer, not because she needed prestige, but because she had plans. Big ones. And she knew she'd need tools, resources, and alliances to bring them to life. The moment she introduced herself, whispers rippled through the crowd. "Wait. ... Is that the girl from the restaurant video?" Leah smiled to herself. She wasn't just that girl anymore. She was Aaliyah Washington, founder of the Lumiere Project, partner in Bistro Lumiere, community leader, future CEO. And every time she walked past a white tablecloth restaurant, every time she saw someone glance at her and make assumptions, she stood taller. She remembered the day she was turned away. But more importantly, she remembered how she walked back in, not as someone needing permission, but as someone who already belonged. And this time, the table was hers. As Aaliyah walked away from the restaurant's front doors, the warmth of the afternoon sun kissed her face, but it did little to dull the sting left by the waiter's dismissive glare. Her sneakers tapped softly against the cobblestone sidewalk as she moved with purpose. Not rushing, but certainly not strolling either. She pulled out her phone, trying to focus on anything but the embarrassment washing over her. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Should she call her dad and tell him what happened, or just brush it off? Be even, as she debated the familiar voice of her best friend. Tasha popped into her mind. Speak up, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. Aaliyah sighed deeply. She wasn't one for confrontation, but this wasn't just about her. It was about every Black girl who'd been treated like she didn't belong. She circled the block, passing a florist's shop where the scent of lilies and gardenias wafted through the air. She paused for a moment, inhaling deeply, letting the calming scent soothe her frayed nerves. As she exhaled, her phone buzzed with a text. It was her cousin Maya. "Hey, don't forget Uncle Charles' surprise. We're all heading there soon?" Aaliyah smiled slightly. Maya's reminder was timely. This wasn't just a lunch outing. This was her dad's big day. He had built Bistro Lumiere from the ground up, and today marked its 10th anniversary. The whole family planned to surprise him with a visit and celebrate. Aaliyah had just gotten there a bit early. Too early, it seemed, for their staff to see her as anything more than a problem. But as she stood at the corner and stared at the restaurant's rooftop terrace, the fire in her chest rekindled. Her father had always told her, "Your presence is your power, baby girl. Walk in like you belong because you do." Those words echoed through her, louder now than they'd ever been. She turned back toward the restaurant with new resolve. She wouldn't let this moment go unchecked. Not out of anger, but out of purpose. Unbeknownst to her, inside the restaurant, the manager, Claudia, had already sensed something was wrong. Claudia had worked under Charles Washington for 8 years and took pride in maintaining the standards he'd built. telegons, hospitality, and equity. She was handling reservations behind the host's desk when she noticed Dylan, the new waiter, smirking slightly as he recounted the incident to another server. Claudia's ears perked. She approached just in time to hear the words. Some random girl came in here like she owned the place. I thought we were running a fast food chain. Claudia's expression hardened. What girl? She asked sharply. Dylan, who hadn't learned to respect Claudia's sharp instincts, responded flippantly. Young black girl. Hoodie, sneakers, looked totally out of place. I told her we were full, obviously. Claudia's stomach dropped. Did she give her name? Nope, Dylan said. Didn't get that far. She knew she wasn't going to get in. Claudia immediately stepped away and pulled out her phone. She had a sinking suspicion and dialed a number she'd called hundreds of times. Aaliyah, she said as soon as the call connected. Aaliyah, still outside, froze when she saw Claudia's name flash on the screen. She picked up, her voice composed but tight. Hi, Miss Claudia. Claudia didn't waste time. Sweetheart, are you here already? Yes, I came early. But someone told me there were no tables. I didn't get a chance to say who I was. There was a long silence. Then Claudia's tone changed, cold and furious. Come back inside now. I'll meet you at the door. Aaliyah hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Okay. Back inside Bistro Lumiere, Claudia stormed through the hallway, her heels clicking like a countdown. By the time she reached the front, Dylan was still chatting with the bartender. She stopped beside him, arms crossed. Dylan, you're done for the day. He blinked. What? Claudia didn't repeat herself. Take off your apron and step into my office. As the two walked away, the glass door opened and Aaliyah stepped in. The few patrons near the entrance turned their heads, watching the moment unfold like a silent scene from a movie. Claudia quickly returned and swept Aaliyah into a warm embrace. Heard her voice apologetic but steady. I'm so sorry you had to go through that, she said. He had no idea who you were, and no. Excuse either. Aaliyah smiled weakly. It's okay. I didn't tell him. I just wanted to see if. But she trailed off. If you'd be treated with the same respect as anyone else, Claudia finished, and you weren't. That's not okay. Ever. The two walked toward the back, where the reserved table for Charles' family was being set up with fresh linens and candles. Claudia personally escorted Aaliyah to the seat with the best view of the kitchen, her father's favorite spot. As she sat, the warmth of the moment began to overtake the earlier sting. But something was growing in Aaliyah's heart, an idea, a resolve, calling she hadn't fully felt before, because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something far bigger, and she wasn't going to stay quiet about it. The next morning brought a different kind of spotlight. Social media had exploded overnight with discussions about the incident at Bistro Lumiere. Dozens of guests who had witnessed the event began posting their own perspectives, many commending Aaliyah's poise and calling out the casual racism she faced. Some tried to justify Dylan's behavior, arguing that he couldn't have known who she was. But those voices were quickly drowned by a tidal wave of others who made it clear. You shouldn't have to be the owner's daughter to be treated with respect. Meanwhile, Aaliyah sat in the quiet of her bedroom, sunlight streaming in through gauzy curtains, scrolling through the endless mentions of her name. Her phone buzzed, relentlessly texts from classmates, news reporters, even distant relatives, who hadn't spoken to her in years. She should have felt empowered, victorious even, but instead she felt a deep ache in her chest. This wasn't how she wanted her father's legacy to be recognized. It wasn't about her being his daughter. It was about being a young black girl in America, once again reminded that her skin color made her a suspect before she even said a word. Aaliyah's mother, Tamika, knocked lightly on the door before entering, holding a tray of breakfast and herbal tea. She sat beside her daughter without a word, letting the silence speak volumes. Eventually, Aaliyah leaned into her shoulder, and with that simple gesture, the grief began to pour out not for herself, but for the many girls who never got the chance to sit down at the table at all. Later that afternoon, Aaliyah stood at the threshold of Bistro Lumiere once again, this time not as a guest, not as a victim, but as the daughter of the man who had built this place from nothing but passion and grit. The restaurant looked the same on the outside elegant facade, pretted lanterns flickering softly beside the entrance, but it felt different now, like the soul of the building had been stirred. When she stepped inside, heads turned. The lunch crowd was light, but the energy was thick with anticipation. Dylan, now back from his suspension hearing, spotted her immediately. His smug grin faltered. Aaliyah didn't acknowledge him. Instead, she made her way toward the kitchen where Marcus, the head chef, and her godfather enveloped her in a warm hug. "You ready, baby girl?" he whispered, and she nodded. The staff had gathered in the back for a special meeting, called not by management, but by Aaliyah herself. She stood before them, her voice steady, her words firm. She didn't rant or shout, she didn't shame, she told her story. Told them what it felt like to be 13 and invisible, 16 and underestimated, 17 and publicly dismissed, in her father's own legacy, and then she looked each of them in the eye and said, "This place my father's dream is supposed to be for everyone, so from now on, it's going to be. Or it won't be at all." A hush fell over the room. Even those who had quietly sided with Dylan earlier now stood awkwardly, ashamed. Aaliyah didn't need to raise her voice to take command. Her presence, her purpose was louder than anything they'd heard in years, by the time word had spread. That Aaliyah was not just a random teenage girl, but the owner's daughter. Whispers turned into full-blown conversations that echoed through the corridors of power in the hospitality world. Bloggers began digging. Local news outlets caught wind of what had happened, and within 48 hours, #Bistro, LUMIERE, trended. Across social media, but it wasn't the restaurant's fine cuisine or ambience that was being discussed. It was the story of a black teenage girl. Denied a table in a restaurant her own father had built, and the visuals didn't hurt either. Aaliyah's poise. Her honey-glazed skin glowing under the soft cafe lights. Natural curls styled in a regal high puff. Her gold-accented blazer cinched at the waist over a black satin turtleneck, and those sharp, ivory-heeled boots that clicked with quiet authority all painted the picture of someone both youthful and powerful. In a single press photo captured by a passerby, she looked every inch the heiress she truly was. Meanwhile, Dylan tried to downplay the incident in internal meetings, calling it a misunderstanding, but that excuse fell flat. The restaurant. Staff had seen her lead with more grace in one conversation than he had shown in his entire tenure. Regulars began asking about that brave young woman and openly questioned why someone like Dylan still had a job. As pressure mounted. So, did Aaliyah's resolve? She wasn't content with just exposing injustice. She was ready to rebuild the culture of Bistro Lumiere from the foundation up. Aaliyah stood before the restaurant's core management team. Her presence unmistakably commanding, despite being just 17. She wore a sleek charcoal gray blazer dress, subtly shimmering under the boardroom lights. Paired with silver pumps and minimalist jewelry, small diamond studs, and a delicate chain bearing her mother's initials. Her natural curls had been parted to the side and framed her face elegantly. Her deep brown skin radiated confidence, and her voice, calm but assertive, cut through the tension in the room. "I'm not here to shame anyone," she began, looking directly at Dylan, who sat awkwardly across the table, tugging at his collar. "I'm here because this place is bigger than one man's prejudice. It's about legacy, and legacy doesn't make room for discrimination." The room was silent, save for the soft clicks of pens and shifting chairs. Some of the older staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to balance loyalty to the past with the glaring need for change. But Aaliyah's clarity left little room for ambiguity. She laid out a strategic plan: mandatory cultural sensitivity training, mentorship program for young staff of color, anonymous reporting systems for guests and employees alike, and quarterly audits on customer service equity. She wasn't asking for permission. She was implementing policy. And for the first time, Bistro Lumiere felt like it might actually live up to the ideals it had always claimed to represent. The news of Aaliyah's decisive leadership spread through the community like wildfire. Within days, local newspapers and social media platforms had picked up the story, showcasing her photo dressed in a tailored white blouse tucked into high-waisted navy trousers, a deep caramel complexion glowing under natural sunlight. hair in a sleek low puff and lips painted with a soft plum gloss. Interviews and blog posts called her the future of hospitality and a teenage powerhouse. But while many praised her poise and initiative, there was a growing undercurrent of resistance from certain longtime employees and patrons who saw the changes as too much.
Ow.
Too fast. One email to the restaurant's public inbox, forwarded to Aaliyah late at night, read, "This place used to have standards. Now it's a PR circus." But rather than let the words unsettle her, Aaliyah printed the email and pinned it above her desk right next to a framed photo of her mother opening. "The restaurant 25 years ago? Every revolution has its noise," she whispered, determination flaring in her eyes. And while Bistro Lumiere's future was being reshaped brick by brick, Aaliyah vowed that its foundation would never again be shaken by silence. Or, Jab Aaliyah ni apni pyro, se usi restaurant ke zaman ko mesus kia, dahan use kabi nahi. Bethan, dia gaya, the Usain, Mazuz, Kia, K, Ab, Wo, Surf, Malik, Ki, Betty Nahi. Boki Eknai Dorki Renuma Hai, EKAC, Renuma Jo Apnea was say, Surf Apni Hai, Nahi. Spoki Har, USS and Sanki, Zindagi, Bedel, Shakti, Hijo is it? Or Barabari, Kalai? Sangharshkar Raha Hai. Uski Kahani, Surf Ika, Wakia Nahi, Balki Umed, or Himat, Kapegam, The Ki Jab Tak Hum, Apni Hak, KL, Lai Kudkad, Nahi Hete, Tab Tak, Hak Surf, Ek Quab Redahai, Bistro Lumiere, AB Surf, Ek Restaurant Nahi, Balki Ek Manzel, Banchuka, Bay, Jahan Har Memen, Kahoapnapin, Mesus Hotatha.
Or Olia ni apni dilmainka sumkaka ya safarav shuruhoahai, or wokabi, peach nahi muriji. Kunka osli takat, anhika paz hoti hai, jo apni kahani, kuda likne kahasla, rakt hain, da.
In